3 weeks ago, the world's oil supply got cut off. This week, every single central bank on the planet froze, and Friday, markets came closest ever to a crash. This is the Sunday's Brief. Quick hits before we go deep. 1. Brent crude closed Friday at $112 a barrel, up 9% in a single week and up 70% since January. Iraq declared superior force on all of its oil fields Friday, and Kuwait refineries got hit by drones. The Strait of Hormuz still shut, day 22. Markets had their fourth straight week of losses. The S&P 500 down 1.5% Friday alone. The Nasdaq down 2%. The Russell 2000 small cap index officially entered correction territory. That's a 10% drop from its recent heights. Only energy stocks are up, everything else is bleeding. Every major central bank held rates this week. The Fed on Wednesday, the Bank of England on Thursday, the ECB, the Bank of Japan, all of them froze by the same thing: oil shock inflation. They can't cut through it. Trump said on Friday he's considering winding down military operations. Oil dropped from $112 to $108 on that single sentence. Then Iran called it a psychological operation. Oil went back straight. That's the week in one paragraph. Okay, let's talk about what actually happened this week, because it wasn't just one story. It was the same story getting worse every single day. So, we're now 3 weeks into the US-Israel war on Iran. The Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway carrying 20% of the world's oil, has been shut since February 28th. And this week, the war stopped being just about Iran and started taking down everything around it. Monday, Israel struck the South Pars natural gas field inside Iran. South Pars is the largest natural gas field on the planet. In retaliation, Iran attacked Qatar's LNG facility, Ras Laffan, which produces 20% of the world's liquefied natural gas. Trump said he wasn't aware Israel was going to do it and promised no more strikes on Iranian oil infrastructure. Iran said they didn't believe him. Tuesday, Goldman Sachs put out a note saying that markets are underestimating the war's risk. Ed Yardeni on CNBC raised his market crash probability to 35%. A senior US counterterrorism official resigned, publicly saying that he opposes this war. Wednesday, the Fed held rates. Powell said inflation isn't coming down as fast as he had hoped. The dot plot showed 7 of 19 Fed members expect 0 rate cuts this year. Markets dropped 600 points during Powell's press conference, and we did a whole mini episode on this. Check it out if you haven't. Thursday, the Bank of England held at 3.75%. They were supposed to cut rates this month. They didn't. Governor Andrew Bailey said, and this is the exact quote, "We have held interest rates as we assess how events unfold. Markets are now pricing in a possible rate hike in the UK later this year. Not a cut, a hike." That's how fast the situation has changed. On Friday, Iraq declared superior force on all foreign-operated oil fields because they cannot ship through the Strait of Hormuz. Drones struck 2 refineries in Kuwait. Brent crude hit $112. The Dow fell by 444 points. The Nasdaq fell 2%, and Goldman Sachs said high oil prices could last all the way through 2027. And then, Trump posted on social media that he's considering winding down on military operations. Oil dropped $4 in minutes. However, Iran's foreign ministers called it a psychological warfare, and that made oil recover. That's where we ended this week. Here's the big picture. Analysts are now warning that even a shift ceasefire won't undo the damage. Energy prices are likely to fall much slower than they have rose because the productive capacity has been physically damaged and will be offline for an uncomfortably long time. This isn't just a market story anymore. It's a food story, a job story, a cost of living story. The IEA has called it the greatest global energy security challenge in history. Now, the quiet story of the week, and this one is genuinely underreported, is that Asia is now in a full energy emergency. While the Western markets obsess over the Dow and oil prices, billions of people across Asia are dealing with gas outages, throwing up with what Bloomberg said the crisis menus, and preparing for fuel rationing at the pump. Japan unilaterally released 80 million barrels of oil from its national stockpiles. China and Thailand have banned jet fuel exports. Vietnam is now preparing for flight cuts from April because it cannot source enough fuel. The Philippines peso hit a record low this week. India is capping commercial gas cylinder distributions in Delhi. China, Japan, India, and South Korea account for 75% of the oil and 59% of the LNG that normally flows through the region affected by this war. These aren't abstract statistics, these are countries that manufacture most of what the Western world buys. If the energy costs explode, the price of everything we import from them goes up too. The global supply chain story is just beginning, and Asia is where it's gonna hit first. The indicator for this week is 2027. That's how long Goldman Sachs now says elevated oil prices could last. Not weeks, not months, years. Through 2027. Context: if oil stays above $100 for that long, we are looking at a fundamentally different economic environment for the next 2 years. Mortgage rates stay high, inflation stays sticky, consumer spending gets squeezed, corporate margins get compressed, and governments, who are already running big deficits, face massive energy subsidy bills. Goldman Sachs said it out loud this week. 2027. That's the number. Now, what are we watching next week? Number 1. Trump's new move on Iran. He said, winding down on Friday. Does that mean anything? Iran called it a bluff. If there's any real ceasefire signal, oil drops $20 instantly and markets rally hard. That's the single most important variable. Number 2. US gas prices. They hit $3.88 a gallon nationally this week. If they cross $4, which analysts say could happen within days, that becomes the political story that overrides everything else. $4 gas is when the ordinary Americans really start feeling in a visceral way. Number 3. March CPI. Doesn't drop until April 10th, but Polymarket already pricing a 96% probability that annual inflation comes to a 2.8% or above. That will be the first reading to fully capture the oil shock. It's going to be ugly. And number 4. Watch Kuwait and Iraq. Both got hit this week. If the war spreads further into the Gulf oil infrastructure, we're genuinely in new territory. Here's what I keep thinking about. 3 weeks ago, peace was within reach. Literally, Oman's foreign minister said a breakthrough had been reached the day before the strikes began. Iran had agreed to nuclear verification. Talks were scheduled for March 2nd. Then the bombs fell. Now we have $112 oil, frozen central banks, crashing markets, an energy emergency across Asia, and Goldman Sachs saying this might last until 2027. The distance between where we were and where we are in 3 weeks is almost impossible to process. That's the world this week. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one of them. And if this was useful, a like would genuinely help me out more than you think. I'm just getting started. I'm Boggy. See you next Sunday.